Oh boy, I just know this video is definitely gonna start a few arguments in the comments. Hello everyone, it's the Necessary Nerd here, and Star Wars. Who doesn't love Star Wars, am I right? Well, maybe not recently. But no matter which generation you come from, everyone has their own set of Star Wars movies that they believe are the best ones. But what's the best Star Wars movie out there, and more importantly, what's the worst? Now, going into this, I'm going to rank all the Star Wars movies by 5 different categories: dialogue, acting, story, action, and overall impact on the franchise. Now, in terms of full transparency, I'm going to let y'all know right now, I was raised on the original movies and then I watched the prequels when they came out in theaters. Now, with that being said, I took all of my fanboyisms out of this discussion and made an entirely objective list. Now, in case any of you are wondering why I have a category for dialogue and acting, there are actors out there who are great regardless of the writing, and then there are those who are only as good as the source material in front of them. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is take all these rankings, put them together, and based on the overall average score, that's how I'm going to rank each movie. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and just get the worst one out of the way first so we can get to all of the actual contenders, and that would happen to be Solo: A Star Wars Story. This movie sucks. The dialogue, the acting, the story, the action, and the overall impact suck. This movie is completely forgettable and is not included in any ranking anywhere else you find, because that is just how quickly society forgot this movie even existed. It's honestly got a bunch of great actors in the movie, and it had a great director attached to it, but in overall execution, it only gets a 1.2 of an average score. Okay, and coming in at number 10, and this should honestly be no shock to anyone out there, but next up is The Rise of Skywalker.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
I mean, honestly, what is there left to be said about this movie?
This is cancer!
Now, The Rise of Skywalker gets a 1 in both dialogue and story because, good God, the dialogue was awful, and the story, it was just one big long MacGuffin chase completely filled with nostalgia bait and retcons. Palpatine somehow returned, Rey is the real chosen one, all of this retconning the original trilogy and the prequels. I have to give The Rise of Skywalker a 0.5 on the overall impact, because when you look at the impact of the franchise itself, Rise of Skywalker was the one that made many fans say that Star Wars is dead. Now, something y'all may notice with all of these Disney sequels is that they have a very similar, if not identical, score in the acting and in the action. This is because, for as flawed as those movies are, you cannot say they had poor acting.
Hold on to your hats! You're about to get pounded!
And you cannot say the action wasn't somewhat decent. However, most of the action in the Disney sequel movies is kind of like the Transformer movies, where yeah, it's, dumb popcorn fun, it's kind of neat to look at, but there's no substance there. So The Rise of Skywalker comes in with a 1.7 average score. Up next we have, to no surprise here, The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker are kind of like a 1-2 punch of just cheap Star Wars awfulness. They're everything a Star Wars movie shouldn't be, and that's in each movie, let alone the fact that they're both part of the same trilogy. Say what you want to about the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, each of which has a movie that has major flaws with it, but no other trilogy has 2 movies that are so universally hated. The prequels may have more faults than any other trilogy, but they are still not as bad as the Disney movies. Last Jedi gets a 3 in dialogue because there are a couple of moments where you're like, oh, okay, I see you were trying there. Once again, the acting is a 4. The story is a 1.5, and the action, just like in The Rise of Skywalker, is a 2, with an overall impact score of 1, because, I mean, honestly, what did either of these movies add to the franchise? So yeah, Last Jedi gets a 2.3. I'm done talking about it. Alright, coming in next we have The Phantom Menace. What? I put a prequel movie below one of the Disney sequel movies?
This man is overgasped.
I told y'all, I'm being objective here. The Phantom Menace, it does have some good redeeming qualities to it, but come on, y'all.
I'm a person and my name is Anakin.
Missa called Jar Jar Binks. Missa, your humble servant.
That won't be necessary.
Oh, but it is. 'Tis demanded by the gods, it is.
Stay down!
Hello, how are you? I am under the water. Please help me. Here too much raining.
Both the dialogue and the acting are at a 2. Between Jake Lloyd and Jar Jar Binks, oh my god, some of the scenes in this movie are very, very painful to get through. However, what redeems this movie is absolutely one of the greatest lightsaber battles that we have ever been given on screen. And come on, we have Phantom Menace to thank for Duel of the Fates, which is arguably the best Star Wars score of all time. So for overall impact, I'm going to give Phantom Menace a 4. That leaves it with a score of 3.2. Up next is Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones is, well, it's not good, but it's also not terrible. The worst thing about Attack of the Clones is that the name doesn't even make sense because there are no clones that attack. I mean, there are clone troopers who fight for the Jedi and the Republic, but I mean, they don't really attack anybody. I will still die on that hill saying that they should have called this movie Star Wars Episode 2, The Shroud of the Dark Side. Why? Because it makes sense for the movie, and it's a line that's literally said in the movie. But anyways, that's for a different video. Now the dialogue gets a 2.5, and that's being kind of generous because we all know of the infamous scene.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
But when you compare it to episode 1 and how much Jake Lloyd and Jar Jar Binks really brought down that entire movie, it's still a tiny bit better. The acting is still not great, so it gets a 3. However, one exception is when Anakin finds his mother out there with the Tusken Raiders. Holy hell, is that scene not just chef kiss. So the action gets a 5. Overall impact, it gets a 4, leaving it with an average score of 3.6. Alright, time to get a little controversial here. Coming in at the next spot is The Force Awakens. I know, I put a Disney trilogy movie over some of the prequels. But let's be fair about this. Take off your rose-tinted glasses and compare The Force Awakens and the first 2 prequel movies. It may be lacking in certain areas, and you could say it's overly dependent on nostalgia. But for the dialogue, I give it a 4. Acting, I'm gonna give it a 5. Story and action are 3 because the story is just, I mean, let's be honest, it's literally just a retelling of the first Star Wars movie.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
But, you know, it's pretty decent, middle of the road, not bad, not great. The action, like all the Disney sequels, you know, it's flashy, kinda sorta good, but not really bad. So, middle of the road score of 3. Now, with an average score of 3.6, The Force Awakens and Attack of the Clones have the exact same average score. But in all honesty, The Force Awakens is a much better made movie, so it does get the bump to 1 spot higher. Okay, so from here on out, we are only talking about Star Wars movies that are legitimately good. So next up is actually Revenge of the Sith. This may end up being the single most controversial placement of this entire list, as a lot of people whose memory doesn't go back before 2005 think that this is the best Star Wars movie. But let's just be real, y'all. The dialogue is still not great at a 3.5. The acting is still not great at a 3.5. With the one exception of Obi-Wan and Anakin having their confrontation on Mustafar, Ewan McGregor absolutely broke my heart watching this movie for the first time. So this scene alone does bring it up a little bit as far as the acting and dialogue.
You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you.
And of course, we get the immaculately done Order 66 scene, which is still arguably one of the most emotional and heart-wrenching moments in the entire franchise. But this movie is literally the culmination of the prequels. It was the entire reason they were made in the first place. It was the one thing that we all wanted to see. The fall of Anakin Skywalker to the dark side and the metamorphosis into the greatest Star Wars villain ever created in Darth Vader. And not only does it have the greatest lightsaber battle that's ever been put to screen, but it also has the second best lightsaber battle with the battle between Yoda and the Emperor. This movie came out almost 2 decades ago, and neither of these fights have been topped since. So for story, action, and overall impact, I'm giving Revenge of the Sith a 4. So for story, action, and overall impact, Revenge of the Sith gets a 5.
Nice.
Which brings its score up to a 4.4. Now, here's where the controversy comes in, because just edging out Revenge of the Sith, I actually have Rogue One. In my opinion, it's not the best Star Wars movie, but it's the best movie that's been made in the franchise. It is just solid all the way across the board, getting a 4.5 in dialogue, acting, story, action, and overall impact. Not to mention that the whole Vader scene in the hallway, which literally makes you fear him like we've never feared him before, that scene on its own makes Rogue one of the best movies in the franchise. But it's not the best. Now, which Star Wars movies rank 1 through 3 should pretty much be no surprise to anyone who's older than, say, 20 years old, because most of this ranking list is pretty much what all of us have agreed upon since the 90s, and that is the third best Star Wars movie ever made is Return of the Jedi. It gets a 5 in both dialogue and acting. With a 4 in story and a 4.5 in action, the story itself is nothing spectacular when compared to episodes 4 and 5, but it does have one of the most expertly shot scenes in the entire franchise, and that is when there's the whole confrontation between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. Vader is walking around the darkness looking for Luke, trying to taunt him into using his rage so he will be easily converted over to the dark side. Meanwhile, Luke is just sitting there in the shadows, with half of his face lit up and half of his face dark, perfectly mirroring the themes of both the light and the dark side battle that's going on within him. You see, it's subtlety like this that the prequels just completely threw out the window. It's the little things, the small nuances in each movie that are made that you go back and you're like, hey, I noticed that. Hey, I noticed that. When you watch the prequels, you pretty much notice everything on the first watch. Now, the action in Return gets a 4.5 because it's just as exciting. One thing that a lot of naysayers like to complain about with the original trilogy is the lack of exciting lightsaber battles. And while none of the lightsaber fights that are in the originals come anywhere close to the action of the one in the prequels, they carry more emotional weight, more importance. There are more thematic undertones going on with these battles. The running theme with the original trilogy when it came to their lightsaber battles was less is more. You know, in all 3 instances that we see Vader throwing down with someone, it's usually he's holding back, or it's all because he's waiting on something, or he's trying to bait Luke into becoming the new apprentice. So there are reasons for the limitations. But that being said, the overall impact is a 4.5. Now, Return also gives us the culmination of the Chosen One prophecy that we wouldn't get until the prequels. It's a perfect, happy ending jumping off point for the franchise, but I gotta admit, the Ewoks on their own are what bring this movie down to 3rd place. Just f*** the Ewoks, okay?
All right, everybody, hands in the air. All right, now I want you to take off your helmets, go outside, and dig your own graves with them.
Han, that's kind of dark.
Shut up! There's enough cutesy crap in this movie. I think we all need this. Now get outside! Please! I've had it up to here with Ewoks!
And coming in at the silver medal is A New Hope, or as it was known when it came out, Star Wars. A New Hope gets rave reviews across the board. It's what started everything. The dialogue is a 4, the acting a 5, the story a 5, the action 5, overall impact 5. That gives A New Hope a score of 4.8, and it just barely misses out on the number 1 spot. Coming in at number 1 should be no surprise to anyone, and that is The Empire Strikes Back. In my opinion, and in the opinions of most critics, this is the quintessential Star Wars movie. If you had to pick one Star Wars movie for the rest of your life to watch, most fans would pick either Empire Strikes Back, or for some reason they would pick Revenge of the Sith. But y'all, most of the people who say that stuff were like 5 years old when the prequels came out. They don't know what they're talking about. That's just the dichotomy between two different generations. You know, you have ones who are raised in the prequels, so their rose-tinted glasses kind of glare over a bunch of the big issues of the prequels, but Empire does everything right. Everything right. The dialogue, good God, I wish I could go higher than a 5. The acting, superb from everyone in this movie. The story, good God, how has this story still not been topped? The most pivotal scene is a very, very tame lightsaber fight, if you could call it that, between Vader and Luke. I hesitate to even call it a lightsaber fight because Vader is holding back the whole time. He's literally just there to try and get Luke to convert to become his new apprentice so that he can take out the Emperor. But, I mean, do we even have to talk about the overall impact of this movie? It's a 5. Like, it's not even within question. So, there we go. The official Star Wars ranking system of this channel puts it at Solo, A Star Wars Story, The Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Force Awakens, Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, Return of the Jedi, A New Hope, and The Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, that's my official ranking. If you guys don't like this, well then let me know how wrong I am in the comments. And if you think I'm one of the biggest idiots you ever heard when it comes to Star Wars, well then why don't you make your own channel and make your own list? That's what all the cool kids are doing. Anyways, I appreciate y'all watching. If you would be so kind, a like and a comment goes a long way, and it only takes just a second to do. And if you really enjoy what I had to say, well then you could consider subscribing and clicking that bell so you don't miss any of the content that we upload every single week. So until then, I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. See you, everybody.